As immigration sweeps spread fear, activists and sheriffs unite to protect neighbors. They dress in plain clothes, never wear uniforms, community organizer Laura Gardu ± Garcia told the 24 attendees, mostly women and a few men and children, who sat attentively in a semicircle of folding chairs in the multi-purpose room of a Quaker meeting house in Greensboro, North Carolina, on a recent Saturday. "We know they drive American cars, and we know most raids take place before 9 a.m., said Andrew Willis Garces, Director of Organizing and Communications for Siembra NC, a North Carolina-based project of the American Friends Service Committee established in the aftermath of the 2016 presidential election. For nearly 2 hours, Willis Garces and Gardu ± Garcia took turns leading the conversation in Spanish, explaining to the group of primarily undocumented Greensboro residents their basic legal rights. The tactics ICE's increasingly aggressive actions over the last 2 years have been met with this form of nonviolent resistance from grassroots groups like Siembra, which has established itself among the communities of North Carolina's Alamance, Randolph, Forsyth, and Guilford counties. In addition to effort, though popular in the communities, these moves prompted a backlash from federal immigration officials, who say they were forced to step up enforcement, including a 4-day operation in February that resulted in the detention of 200 undocumented immigrants from across North Carolina. Sean Gallagher, director of ICE's Atlanta field office, said the February raids were necessitated by some sheriffs' dangerous policies and warned that those counties should expect increased ICE presence as the new normal. Gallagher's comments reflect a national trend toward large-scale enforcement operations by ICE over the last 2 years, especially in localities with so-called sanctuary policies that prohibit or discourage local law enforcement agencies from certain forms of cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. Although Gallagher, whose office covers Georgia and the Carolinas, singled out counties where sheriffs were declining to cooperate with ICE, the agency has been conducting large-scale enforcement operations across the state. "The February raid, it paralyzes us," said one woman at the Siembra meeting, as the conversation turned to the spread of rumors on Facebook about supposed ICE activity. "Many in the group, ICE, I think, has 2 forms of controlling us," another woman told the group. "One is through detention, hence Siembra's mission to provide reliable information about ICE tactics, helping immigrants reclaim some control over their own lives, sending volunteers door to door in their own neighborhoods, handing out information about ICE, immigrants' legal rights and how to report suspected ICE activity to a 24-hour hotline. An unfamiliar car. If ICE activity is confirmed, Siembra spreads the word on one of its 10 or so WhatsApp groups, organized by zip code, with hundreds of people in each, warning them to be cautious about going outdoors. Siembra verify, we want people to feel empowered and powerful, not anxious and afraid. And that they can train other people on that same thing and think, we are not just resilient but we are powerful, said Willis Garces. During the first week of February, Willis Garces said, we got 680 phone calls in a 5-day period. In a typical week, for anyone residing in the country illegally, the fear of deportation is a constant that predates President Trump and will continue after he's left office. The president with perhaps one of the best indications of the agency's approach to interior enforcement under Trump came from during a June 2017 appearance before the House Appropriations Subcommittee, in which he spelled out the implications of then-Secretary of the Department of Homeland Services John Kelly's officially dismantling the enforcement priority categories established under President Obama. Homan said across the country, ICE arrests of immigrants without criminal convictions have skyrocketed under President Trump, more than tripling during the first 14 months of his presidency, according to ICE data initially reported in August. Among the ways the Trump administration has sought to carry out this general mission, including multiple by former Attorney General Jeff Sessions to from sanctuary jurisdictions, is by expanding its partnerships with local law enforcement agencies through Gary McFadden made clear that this mission did not align with his during his campaign last fall for Sheriff of Mecklenburg County, which includes North Carolina's most populous city, Charlotte. Among the changes, in his first official act as sheriff, McFadden followed through on this campaign promise with a public celebration at Hispanic-owned Manola's Bakery in Charlotte, marking the end of the 287 grams era in Mecklenburg County. McFadden acknowledges he made a statement, but the media-savvy sheriff, easily recognizable in his tailored, three-piece suit and designer shoes, insists his position on ICE isn't about politics. Instead, McFadden told Yahoo News, the decision to terminate the program was based on his own 37 years of law enforcement experience, including 22 spent as a homicide detective with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Making his job, it was eroding trust, McFadden said of the program. It creates an environment. You are helping to breed violence, because you are allowing these things to go unreported, and people know that, he said. Under his new policy now, sheriff's deputies will no longer carry out ICE duties, such as questioning inmates about their immigration status to determine if they are in the country illegally, nor will an ICE agent be stationed inside the Mecklenburg County Jail. This is a voluntary agreement, it's not the law, McFadden said of 287 grams, adding that he viewed the February rates as retaliatory. They ask us to play. In response to McFadden's public breakup with ICE, Gallagher, the Atlanta field office director, called the new sheriff's action an open invitation to aliens who commit criminal offenses that Mecklenburg County is now a safe haven for persons seeking to evade federal authorities. In a statement to Yahoo News, Brian Cox, spokesman for ICE's southern region, referred to that same comment, as well as other warnings he and Gallagher both issued against McFadden's pledge to end 287 grams in his election campaign. Claims of retaliation for McFadden, ending 287 grams was simply a necessary step toward rebuilding trust between his office and the immigrant community. I have to still protect these people, documented or undocumented, said McFadden. If an McFadden repeated this same message following a recent Sunday Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church, eliciting resounding applause from some 500 people who filled every seat in the chapel, stood against the walls and spilled out into the front entrance of the church, lining up to shake hands, take selfies, and above all express their gratitude to the new sheriff. People are really excited about his stance regarding ICE, said Father Hugo Medellin, associate pastor at the church, whose large congregation is made up mostly of Hispanic immigrants. As soon as we don't know how to thank him, said Marlene Serafin Silva, who volunteers in the kitchen at Our Lady of Guadalupe. We feel more secure. Silva was born in the capital of Mexico and has lived in the United States for 50 years, half that time in Charlotte. She was one of the first. The people are scared, you know. That's why we're feeling. The recent ICE operations in North Carolina are not unique, but reflective a number of larger national trends seen in similar sweeps targeting immigrant communities over the past 2 years, particularly in sanctuary cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. Unlike traditional worksite raids, these community-based operations have been carried out through traffic stops and other seemingly random encounters with plainclothes agents in unmarked cars. They've also been. Collateral arrests of people encountered during targeted ICE operations are not new. However, Mark Fleming, Associate Director of Litigation for the National Immigrant Justice Center, described operations in which ICE is literally going into Hispanic neighborhoods in Chicago where they believed there would be undocumented immigrants and pulling people over with no basis, to identify whether they were unlawfully in the U.S. Last May, the NIJC, accusing ICE of using warrantless traffic stops and racial profiling, among other tactics, to conduct more than 100 collateral arrests over the course of 6 days in Chicago. 68% of the total 156 people caught up in that particular operation. In the complaint, initially filed on behalf of 2 longtime Chicago residents arrested in that sweep, NIJC noted that language in announcing results of the Chicago operation echoed those released following similar actions in Los Angeles, New York, Northern California, and Philadelphia. Like Gallagher's ICE maintains that sanctuary laws or other policies that limit ICE's ability to utilize local law enforcement resources are a threat to public safety. In reality, the reality is they know they will have to use their resources only to go after.
Raindrop, drip, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.